The cost of intelligence is dropping to zero, but that doesn't mean the work gets easier. It just gets messier. More agents, more tools, more moving parts. This podcast is for the people in the middle of it. Those wiring this into real work, testing it under pressure, and making it all stick. In each episode, I chat with people to figure out what's working right now and how to apply it. Welcome to Bots at Work, presented by Fringe Legal. Let's get into it. Helen, thanks so much for coming on the pod. Excited to have you on.
Hi, it's nice to join your conversation.
Yeah, and I've been following a lot of your writings, a lot of your experiments, and I wonder if we can start there. So you've been running this 100 Days of AI experiment, and you've just gone over the 50-day threshold, so you're halfway through. Can you take me back to what made you start? And yeah, where are you with the experiment at the moment? And just maybe tell people a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, so actually I call it OpenClaw Law LLP. So it's my personal technology experiment. So the story was like I first published something called Legal AI Value Stack. So that's a framework. After
Oh,
that,
we'll come back to that for sure.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So after that, I kept asking myself, can I actually walk that roadmap? Not just write about it, but to do it. So I started building my AI native law firm from scratch. And it runs on the OpenClaw. And inside this code, I'm the supervising attorney, and I have two AI agents helping me. The first one is Morgan. So Morgan is my senior associate. And the other one, I call it Cleo. So Cleo is my junior associate. And so Morgan, as my senior associate, she handles strategy, client management, email screening, and she can also break complex issues into smaller pieces and assign them to sub-agents or Cleo. And for Cleo, so she does legal research, dig into the case law, and draft the first draft of the memos. So she's the one who do all the dirty work. And also, they talk to each other, which is very different from what you're seeing in other agents' experiments.
Yeah.
So I have a multi-agent and agent-to-agent communication. So they can argue with each other. That's actually the most interesting part. So I built a system where Cleo can challenge Morgan when she feels like she disagrees with Morgan. Every time when they disagree, I get what I call an argument report. So that is a summary of exactly where they see the problem differently. And that can tell me where to focus my review. Maybe to some degrees that can help to reduce the hallucination AI create. But that's my understanding. I didn't do it like an academic project. It's just my guess. So yeah, that's pretty much about my recent experiment.
I think that's super cool. And for anyone who may not be familiar with OpenClaw, it's a open source, I guess, local first AI agent framework. And that's how I would describe it. And essentially, it is agentic. So unlike a chatbot, as Helen described, you are able to assign, delegate, and offload tasks. So they are able to continue working kind of asynchronously in the background. And so I also have an OpenClaw instance. My OpenClaw is called Claudia. How hard was it for you to set all of this up? And has it been, because what you described sounds a very smooth, issue-free operation. As someone who runs a OpenClaw instance, I think the reality may not be that. Is that the case, or am I doing something terribly wrong? Because I spend probably as much time troubleshooting my instance as I do getting the benefits from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get what you are saying now. So first, OpenClaw's overall stability is not good enough. It breaks a lot every day. So agents can go in circles because I have two agents and they can talk to each other and never stop forever. So, and sometimes your rules that you set up in your sole MD that will not be followed by your agent. And I don't know why, because sometimes it may be due to the limitation of the AI, or it may be due to the the setting of the Discord or OpenClaw. So it's very hard for like a typical lawyer without any tech background like me. It's very hard for me to keep it organized.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I feel like the features of the OpenClaw aren't comprehensive enough. For example, when you use Cloud Code, you can try something like how to say it. You can have, for example, if you want to do some high risk things, Cloud Code every time will ask you before it
You can
does
give
it.
it permissions. Yeah.
Yes, but in OpenClaw, you have to set up the rules
Yeah.
beforehand. For example, you have to write down a lot of rules in the SoMD or agent MD.
Mm-hmm.
Only in this way it can follow your security rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and also, so now I'm trying to, as I mentioned to you earlier,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to migrate my OpenClaw things to Hermes agent or to manage
Mm.
agent. So manage agent is a feature in Cloud, and Hermes
Mm.
agent is another agent platform. Got I think the first place in GitHub recently. So as an agent, I tried them both because I want to testing alternatives, and I think because it's more like a very immature thing about agents. So
Yes.
you have to like take additional efforts. You have to set up your guardrails carefully,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to supervise it every time. You cannot
Yes.
leave it when you sleep because it may, sometimes we call it like some prompt injection, and
Yeah.
sometimes you may just lost a lot of tokens in the process.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of very dangerous.
Mm.
So I think if you want to try agents, you have to be very patient in the whole process.
Yeah. And again, just for some listeners who may not know this, because, well, for number one, all of this stuff is very bleeding edge. In fact, Peter, who created OpenClaw, who then got acqui-hired by OpenAI, I think he still describes it as a rather technical product, and it's on purpose. It's designed to have friction in the process, because it very much changing by the day. Sometimes there's multiple updates each day. So there is a lot that happens. And the same thing with Hermes Agent, and they have different philosophies around how they work. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on that in a minute. But you get a huge benefit and you get to define and customize exactly how these agents should behave. So what I do like about OpenClaw is it does personify the agents. You have this heartbeat which checks in with the agent every X minutes. I think by default it's 30 minutes or something, which can be changed. The agents have a soul. And by the way, these are all just marked down, they're text files, but you can define its characteristics as personalities, how it should behave. And then it obviously has instructions like agent.md and skills, as you might be familiar with. And I think some of those things are amazing. But to your point, the learning curve is steep, very steep, because, you can, and for what it's worth, the agent can help you fill that information in by talking to you and over
Mm-hmm.
time. But as you were saying, I have the same issue where the information is captured in the soul.md or elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but it just doesn't remember sometimes. It's kind of like working with an assistant who just somehow just gets amnesia one day.
Mm-hmm.
And they should know that. And of course, there are the challenges of just monitoring the whole thing. I mean, it's a really cool project. And I'm curious, what do you know today and day 55, 56, whatever day you might be on,
Mm-hmm.
that you wish you knew in sort of the first week of getting started with this project?
Yeah. So, honestly, it's much harder than I expected. So
Mm.
that's the most honest thing I can say. As I mentioned, AI agents are fun and deeply unsafe at the same time. So
Mm.
that was my earliest realization. You think you give them an instruction and they will follow it, they don't. And I posted about this on LinkedIn, so I call it the security guardrails framework. I just generated by myself based on my real experiment because sometimes I spend a lot of weekends just fixing bugs in my agent rules. You close one loophole and another one just opens. And yeah, so and also that is, I think, especially hard with multi-agent because single agent is manageable, but when two agents are talking to each other, you need to constantly adjust to reduce friction between them. And you have to make sure they stop at the right moment instead of arguing forever. And the problems come from three directions at once because the platform itself has limitations, the models have their own issues, and the chat software, Discord, Telegram, isn't really designed to support this kind of use case. So I think that's the first point I want to mention, and we just discussed a little bit on it. So for the
Yeah.
second one, I would say the agent workflow tools that exist today are good for basic tasks. I
Mm.
use Cloud Code and Cowork,
Mhm.
checking emails, scheduling, and simple tasks. So those work well, but agent
Mm.
arguing with each other or agents spawning sub-agents. So that's a completely different level. There's no off-the-shelf solution for that yet. I had to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
As you I just mentioned, when you have agent-to-agent communication, sometimes you can see the blind spots AI may have because the agents show their confusion on one point. And
Mm.
also, sometimes you can assign different roles on the agent. For example, you can have someone as a business advisor and the
Mhm.
other one as the legal advisor. So in this way,
Yeah.
you can see the common ground between the legal and business perspective.
Mm.
So, and I think it's very interesting. And also because
Do you think as a law firm, your OpenClaw LLP as a law firm, it's functioning well? Because I mean,
um,
no business and no organization is perfect either. You still have, friction. You still have people arguing with each other. Probably you don't get an argument report at the end of it. But do you think as an experiment is going well? Is teaching you what the dynamics are between the agents pretty well?
yeah, I think the point is that I deliberately make them to arguing. So
Mm.
yeah, it's my purpose. It's not like because only in this way you can see, I think, the value of the multi-agent platforms. So when you have different agents, you can give them different roles.
Mm.
And I just want to supplement what I said. I'm not a litigator, but if
Hmm.
I'm a litigator, maybe I can ask the agent to pretend they are my opposite party. So in this way, I can stress test my arguments. I didn't try it, but I think maybe it's valuable. And also, if you want to take it as a real law firm, I would say definitely it doesn't work very well because you have too much chaos happening every day. But it's my if you take it as an experiment, I think it's very good because how to say it? Because recently I realized very few firms they are actually deploying agents in their workflows.
Right.
And I think in this way, I can kind of encourage more legal
Mm.
professionals to use
Yeah.
AI, to use agents, because
Yeah.
agents is very different from chatbots, as you
Yes.
mentioned. So chatbots is something you ask a question and you get the answer. It's a very straightforward. But for agents, it can really do the work for you. And I think that's a key point of the experiment. I don't want to make it as a real law firm or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And even if you are using, let's say, the Claude's managed agent services, which is an enterprise tool, which allows you to
Mm,
do some of this, but with better guardrails to be able to host it, in a managed environment. I think a lot of what you shared are extremely valuable learnings because again agentic design and all of these principles on how do you manage multiple agents collaborating
mm,
communicating, how do you think about all of the potential conflicts, the loopholes and the edge cases. I think that's still key. So I do think from an experiment point of view, whether the outcome isn't to create a law firm, but you learn so much about how do you think about from a first principles bit, because I can tell you before I started going down the OpenClaw rabbit hole, I was not thinking about creating so many concrete guardrails. But in my OpenClaw environment, it's in a separate machine, but they also have their own emails, for example, and they have their own accounts because I want to be very cognizant of the risk, right? To your point, it could be prompt injection, it could be something else. So you need to figure out how do we safeguard this, much like
Mhm.
you would with a user in a real environment.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just want to add one point, so maybe we can discuss it later. So it's
Mm,
about my AI native law firm
mm,
transformation, and I also call it a legal AI value stack. So when
yeah.
I design this experiment, I just want to kind of testify my theory.
Mm,
So the first step is about raw AI capability. The second step is AI plus workflow. And the
mm-hmm,
third is AI plus data, property data. And the fourth is infra. And the fifth step is hybrid model, the
mm,
AI native law firm. So currently I'm at the step 2 and the step 3. So AI agent plus workflow and agent plus property data. So I ask the agents to run an argument report and also a debrief report every time
mm,
I finish talking with them. So in this way, I can help the agent to generate more skills and playbooks based on my chatting. So I think that's the initial point of the self-learning data layer, which I think is very important in the transformation.
yeah, and I think love to talk a bit more about that because I do like the framing of the value stack, and
Mhm.
I'll link to your post about that. But yeah, the 5 levels are the raw AI capability to start at level 1, the AI plus workflow, the UI layer at level 2, the proprietary data at level 3, the infra layer, the system of record, as you
Yeah,
called it, level 4, and then the hybrid model, right? So that's
yeah.
when you're not selling software to law firms, you're kind of you're creating a software layer itself. I like the framing because I like a good maturity framework because it helps people assess where they might be.
Mhm.
What was the driver for coming up with this? Was it just so you can measure where you are in your journey, or to help others sort of think about where they are?
I think this there are two sizing of it. The first side is about how to develop your legal AI company, or how to, as a legal AI company, how to navigate when you faces compet the competition from Cloud or Gemini. And the other side is about how to transform your original legal work, how to transform a traditional law firm or traditional legal department. So these two questions, I'm thinking about them every day. And I think that's a motivation for me to, just very naturally to have this idea. And I just want to share it with other people to get the feedback and to test it whether it works. And yeah, so I think the turning point is about the recent Anthropic's move in legal AI world. We can see it very clearly about Claude's legal plugin, right? And the Claude's words plugin. And recently we just got the first ever Claude legal webinar. So I think these things have, just um, make me to think deeply about this topic. And I think that's also why people kind of, paid much attention on my framework because
Mm.
they found out, wow, Helen thing is right. So because it's kind of explains the chaos around the cloud
Mm.
versus Harvey or other legal AI companies.
Yeah.
People kind of very anxious, but they don't know how to start with them.
Yeah.
So for lawyers, they may think, okay, now I have cloud. How can I use it to transform my work? But for legal AI
Mm.
founders, they are very anxious because they kind of feel like lose their jobs, lose their business. So my framework just help both of them, both of the groups
Mm.
to navigate.
Where do you think most AI companies are across the 5 stages of the value stack? Do you think they're still at
Mhm.
that early stage, or they're starting to move into the later stages using proprietary data and moving into what you called sort of
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
the AGI kind of pathway?
Yeah, I think most legal AI companies now are still at level 1 or level 2, and I just wanted to clarify the level 1 and level 2. So for level 1, I call it raw AI capability. This is any way you are using AI as a chatbot. you ask it a question and have it, draft something. Even if you have a rag layer on top, even if there is a plugin, if you are still in a chat window and AI is just responding to your prompts, that's level 1. For level 2, I call it AI plus workflow. And I think that's where AI kind of connects to how lawyers work, not a chat window. I see many companies, they have the word plugin features, which I think kind of very typical tools for contract review now. And I think most companies, they are level 1 or level 2 companies. Because but I think,
And I think is that where you think, and you're talking about the Claude webinar, and obviously Claude had their legal plugin that was released, which is essentially a collection of skills more
Mhm.
than anything else. Do you think that's where those companies who, I guess, for lack of a better word, and I don't know how many companies think that having a word add-in is a moat itself, but just having a plugin doesn't give you an automatic sort of dominion over the vertical. But
Yeah, of
I can
course.
imagine that's where it starts becoming a bit complicated, right? Where you're thinking, well, should I use this, or I already pay for the Claude subscription for my organization, or
Yeah.
Perplexity, or OpenAI? Why not just use that to do some of those basic things? And I don't mean sort of, things like drafting full documents, but if you're running a red line, for example, that could now potentially happen comparing it to your playbook.
Yeah, so that's why everyone wants to be at level 3 or level 4 in my
Mm,
framework. So for level 3, it's a proprietary data. But here's the problem I have to say. Like, level 3 requires scale. So the kind of proprietary data I'm talking about is learning which clause types cause the most friction in a given industry, or which risk flags predict the deal failures. So
yeah.
that intelligence only emerges across hundreds or thousands of clients. So no single client's usage can produce it. So you need a
Mm,
lot of users, and you need those users to trust you with their core data, their contracts, their negotiation
mm,
patterns, or whatever. Then your platforms learns from all that and turns into intelligence that benefits everyone. I have to clarify because sometimes you can correct me if I'm wrong. So
mm,
because sometimes you choose opt out, means that your AI platforms cannot train your data, but
mm.
sometimes your behaviors data can still
Right.
be counted into the training data. Is that right?
So I'm not an expert in this, but that's
Yeah.
my understanding, right? Because I think there are two different things. There is learning from your inputs, and then there's learning from your behaviors, because behavior are usage signals, right? Which buttons are people pressing? What are they doing?
Yeah.
And most companies, traditional SaaS and AI native, do look at that because you want to be mindful of how do
Mhm.
users utilize our platform? Are there features that are just not used? Features that we think should be highlighted more, but because they're buried in a complicated flow and a hogmanay of massive menus, no one gets to them. And I do think that it's a signal, whereas the other information, which is people's prompt and so on, which for most they will opt out of. And a lot of the enterprise plans means you're automatically opting out of that. I think
Mhm.
most CISOs want that. So I think you don't learn from what people are doing with your tool, but you do learn from how they're using the tool.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I also wrote in my original article
Mm.
about the level 4 because when we talk about level 4, we will think about a Clio and a Phi 1, but we also wondering if every legal AI company wants to have the strongest defensibility, why
Yeah.
not just become a Clio and a Phi 1? But the truth is that it's too hard for you to become them because I think most of them kind of have a very long-term history and they
Mm.
have built up the credibility in their customers for many years. So, for example, I know Harvey has kind of a feature called shared workspace.
Mhm.
So you can upload your firm's materials there and also share the materials with your clients. So it can become another version of iManage. Clients are, I think, some partners they just talk about this feature with me, and I think they cannot fully rely on this feature to
Right.
store their data because they still trust iManager, they still trust Clio, but they
Mm,
cannot fully trust Harvey, which is very new to them. It's just like a VC-based startups,
mm,
running for several years. So it's harder for law firms to make the determination like I just want to switch to Harvey or switch to
mm.
another platforms. They still kind of get stuck with Clio or Fine Wine because they trust them. It's very simple.
Yeah. But I think it's a more complicated problem than that because even if you because I think trust is one factor and the
Mhm,
other factor is if you use that the workspaces example with a DMS is more than just a storage, right?
mhm,
Although that's kind of at the surface at this most basic level, it's a document management system. There is a lot of complexity built in, including connections and integrations into other systems. It becomes your single source of truth. And even if the sharing capability is handled by another company, let's say a Harvey in that instance,
mhm,
that's only for one scenario. How
mm,
does that scale across the firm?
mm,
And does it give you all of the controls that you need for a lot of other things? And this is why, whether we look at a Harvey, Legora, and other tools,
mm,
they do connect with the document management systems
mhm,
because sure, you can store documents, but it's how you're storing documents, how they get exposed, who they get exposed to, retention periods, and all of the hundreds of additional questions that someone at one point had to think through.
mhm,
And you always end up with this complex scenario of the tool over here can do X,
mhm,
this tool can do Y, and then there is this sort of overlap that makes things complicated in the Venn diagram of things.
mhm,
And if you can make that overlap bigger, then you may be able to get with one. Otherwise, you have to have a multi-product strategy. And also, I mean, given how quickly things are changing, and I know you mentioned MCPs in your article as well,
yeah,
that helps to change some of these things because at
mm,
least my belief, I don't know what you think, is
mhm,
as a technology buyer, you are absolutely thinking about all of these things.
mhm,
As a user, I never want the user to think about this. To
mm,
the user, it should never matter where the documents are stored. You have a surface through which you're interacting to get your desired outcome. And that surface ideally connects to all the places that wherever the information is stored. So
mm,
it's as frictionless for you as possible.
mm,
And I think we're slowly moving into that world through MCPs and previously APIs,
mhm,
but it does require a lot of cross organizational collaboration and even internal collaboration, which is
mm.
always the hard part.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's also a good topic we can discuss together. So,
Yeah.
how do you see the dynamic between Anthropic and Harvey?
Yeah, well, I won't single out Harvey, but we'll say Anthropic and legal tech vendors. Let's just we'll
Yeah.
broaden the scope. I think it's tough, right? So, and I think Anthropic is probably the right player to pick here because um, them versus a OpenAI, they tend to focusing a bit more on enterprise and certainly enterprise knowledge work. I
Mhm,
think both of them are equally focused on coding use cases, but I think it's challenging. You have these companies that have the raw intelligence, right? Most legal tech companies are not developing their own frontier models, which means they're simply plugging into and doing some fine tuning and other behind the scenes stuff
mm,
on top of OpenAI, on top of Anthropic and other LLMs. So I guess the question becomes, what's the moat? And on one side, and I'm just talking out loud, on
mm,
one side, you'll have an audience saying, well, this is just a wrapper.
mhm,
I am of the view that there is nothing wrong with a wrapper. A wrapper requires you to have deep understanding of your user base,
mhm,
and there's nothing wrong with that. So many tools forever have been just wrappers built on top
mm,
of things,
mhm,
and that's fine because that's how it should be, right? Like a generic company is not focusing on a niche use case, and it doesn't make sense for you to have to reinvent the wheel when you can. That's the whole point of libraries in the past, or using APIs, and now using, LLMs as your intelligence layer. But I would absolutely think
Mm,
that as a company that's using Anthropic or OpenAI as my intelligence layer, I have to sleep with one eye open
mm,
to say, is today the day they're going to release product X that competes with what we do?
mhm,
And it's not to say it's going to take all of your market share in one day. I mean,
mm,
although we've seen examples of that, right?
mm,
You wrote about when Anthropic released a number of tools before, how it's had a shift in the public markets.
mhm.
They recently released Claude Design, which had an impact on Figma,
Yeah.
for example. Not that it's a direct competitor, but slowly but surely it takes some market share away. So it's a tricky situation. I think that really the key question becomes, as someone who wants to get that technology, you and I are not good examples, because I think
Mm,
we're too much in the bubble, both
mhm,
as users and also just people who are looking into this. I
mhm,
think the normal user in a law
mm,
firm,
mm,
particularly, or in-house, I'm not sure how much they're thinking about this, but I can imagine an in-house procurement person saying, look, we have Perplexity or we have Claude for everyone.
mhm.
Do we really need to look at this other thing? And it creates another point of procurement friction before a decision can be made. So at the very least, it caused delays in adoption
Mm.
and procurement of technology.
Yeah, so I just want to share my thoughts on it.
Mm,
So here's my prediction, and I may be wrong. And so if Harvey doesn't get acquired by Anthropic or OpenAI,
yeah.
its biggest revenue source may
Mm,
eventually be running as a plugin inside their platforms.
mm. Do you think that, I mean, both of them have also raised, and I know you talk about Harvey, I talk about both Harvey Lagora, they're my sort of Anthropic OpenAI sort of equivalent in legal tech world,
Yeah,
but they also have both raised a lot of money. So that's a
yeah.
big acquisition, right? So as you think about the multiples required to return what probably you know, what the VCs need and the investors demand,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, and I don't know, I'm happy to have either of the founders on the pod to talk about this. But I wonder, I imagine they have the conviction
Mm,
that they are going to be bigger companies than what
just a
a
plugin.
acquisition would get them today. Right? Generally, there are both very mission driven companies, and they want to, I suspect, fulfill the mission. But do you think an acquisition of one or the other happens in the next 12 months?
Maybe not uh, very near future, but
Mm.
I think maybe
Eventual.
yeah, eventual
Yeah.
because I see last week, SpaceX just announced a deal to potentially acquire Cursor.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
so and before that, I think OpenAI tried to buy Cursor also. So every major AI lab wants to own the
Yeah.
full stack. They have the
Yes.
motivation to acquire
Yeah.
these companies. And
Mhm.
also, I would say something like the App Store.
Mhm.
Maybe one day, iPhone we have app stores, and maybe
Mhm.
one day cloud can become the app store.
Yeah.
So
Well,
all
OpenAI's tried that, right? They have their sort of plugin store. They did have an app store, I guess,
yeah,
once upon a time, and they
yeah.
had GBTs and all of these other things. But I do think, as you're
Mhm,
talking, I think probably the biggest signal is, both companies, Anthropic and OpenAI, have now developed and are creating their own applications. No longer is it just API and chatbot.
mhm,
You've got Codex, and then you've got Cowork and just the general Anthropic
mm,
app. So they are starting to take space on the user's desktop too,
mm.
to sort of start competing with, okay, this is what we want you to open to start your day.
Yeah, so that might be very dangerous,
Yeah.
much more dangerous for the AI companies now. So scary.
Yeah. So, but it's a fast moving field.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you mind if we change gears just a little bit? I'm conscious of time. So you wear multiple hats, and I know you also run these sort of seminars, roundtables in Silicon Valley. So you get the opportunity to speak to lots and lots of people. I wonder, what's your What's your take on the state of big law versus AI native firms? So, my friend and colleague Matt, he tracks AI native firms
Mm.
through this site, which we'll link in the comments. And I see more and more firms being added there on a sort of daily, weekly basis. So certainly there are more and more AI native firms.
Yeah.
YC before sort of put in a request for startups for people to explicitly build competitors to big law. So we have sort of signals from one of the biggest incubators. Um, yeah, what do you think? Where are we with AI? And do you think it's real competition from AI native firms towards the big law firms?
Yeah, so like a few days ago, I just attended the Stanford Future Law Week.
Mm,
I was one of the guest speakers in Desa's workshop.
mm,
So I saw this dynamic between the big law and AI natives law firms playing out in real time. Like big law firms and AI native startup. So
mm,
it's very. I think it became clear that they are not competing with each other, but they are each racing to fix their own weakness. So AI native law firms have speed. They can
mhm,
build fast, deploy fast, and iterate fast, but
mm,
they lack deep legal expertise. They struggle with complex cases, and clients don't trust them yet. So trust takes years to build.
mm,
And also, on the other hand, big law has the trust. They have the talents, pipelines. They have the
mm,
relationships with the very, good clients. But they adopt AI extremely slowly. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Their billable hour model works against efficiency. And
mm,
if AI makes you faster, you bill fewer hours. So that's a structural problem. And also, I mentioned in my post before, so in big loss, you have a very long-term pilot phases. You
mm,
have a very complex piloting issues. You have a committee supervising all the things. So, for example, maybe this year we have Opus 4.7, and we raised this issue. We wanted to buy it, and we just raised the issue to the committee. But maybe finally they approved it. But then at that point, and the latest model becomes another one. So AI changes very fast, and I don't think the efficiency in big law firms can guarantee anything. So I think both sides are racing, but they are not.
yeah.
They're still in a different level. But maybe one
Do you think if we project ahead, there's a convergence in the services they can offer, so they do become competitors in sense? I know they're not today, but do you think that's the trajectory they're on to become competitors, or it's much more the AI native firms are taking on the sort of kind of work and the scope of
day.
work which maybe the big law firms either don't want or aren't suitable for?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's also very inspiring because one thing I know some big law firms are acquiring very leading legal tech companies now.
Mm,
And on the other hand, I can see some AI native law firms like Lom AI, they
mhm,
hired many very great talents from big
mm,
law firms. So maybe I
mm,
think in both ways they can kind of, as you said, converge.
mm.
But
Maybe, yeah,
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 I think it's not a common thing, at least for this stage,
yeah.
because it's hard to tell whether it is AI native law firms, because there are kind of many buzzwords around this concept.
Yes.
So when
Mm,
this is AI native law firms, maybe it's just to use AI every day. Lawyers use AI every day,
mm.
and they call it AI native law firms.
Yeah. Well, I guess from your perspective, what do you think what are the characteristics of a AI native law firm then?
I think at least you should ask AI to help you to organize the client intakes part.
Hmm.
And also it can help you generate all the first draft of the memos or other deliverables
Mm,
your clients ask for. So that's the basic idea.
mm,
That means you heavily relying on AI to
mm,
control all the works on your desk. And also agents. So
Mm,
if AI native law firms doesn't use AI agents now, I would say it's not AI native law firms.
mm,
Yeah, because
yeah.
agentic AI is already a very, I think that if you still use it as a chatbot, it's a very, it's not a good, example to
Mm.
say, okay, I'm leading in this area.
It sounds like there's a lot of open question, but things are moving fast. We'll see if there's acquisitions of the big players by the frontier labs at some point in the future, and we'll see what happens with AI native law firms. And before we wrap up, I have a couple of quick fire questions.
Mhm.
You don't have to give me quick fire answers, but I would love to get your take on this. I guess to start with, what's one AI tool that you would miss if it disappeared, if you couldn't use it anymore?
Cloud, definitely.
Claude. Yeah. Are you a Cowork user? Or are you a Claude
Uh,
Code user, or all
Work
of the
and
above?
Cloud Code, both. Yeah.
Okay.
So Cloud is my thinking partner, I would say. So not just for legal work, for
Mm,
everything,
mm.
strategy, writing, debugging agent rules, all the things.
All the things. Okay. Cool. Um, what task do you think will be fully automated within 2 years that you do today? I guess specific tasks for you that you do day by day. Maybe in like 6 months or a year or 2 years, you will just be looking back and thinking, "Oh my God, I can't believe I used to do that myself."
Yeah, I think standard contract review, because
Mm,
now people can use Lagra or Harvey to do the contract review, but
mm-hmm,
not every, but you can not use it, like you cannot see it in every law firm or in every legal department. But I think within 2 years, most law firms and most legal departments, when they do the standard contract review, they will use AI.
mm,
They can, do the review against their own playbooks. So the AI reads the contract
mm,
and compares it to your standards and flags what's different. And the
mm-hmm.
human just looks at the flags. So
Yeah.
that should be fully automated.
Yeah. Perfect. What's one of the biggest mistakes you think teams make when they're thinking about implementing AI or leveraging AI day by day?
I think the biggest mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake is that buying tools without redesigning your workflows, kind of in the between the level 1 and level 2. So
Mm.
because sometimes people just bought AI and onto the old process and wonder why it doesn't transform anything. That's step
Yeah.
1 thinking, when they need step
Yeah.
2 thinking.
Yeah. 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 Couldn't agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. And then last question, how do you think about where to begin? So so I guess maybe think about it this way.
Mhm.
Someone who has done nothing with AI
Mhm.
and they're like, wow, after listening to this, Helen has been able to do so much with AI. I need to start. Where can they begin?
Oh, okay, I got
Yeah.
it. So for those people, I would say they need to change their mindset about AI,
Mm,
because I think for this group of people, they usually think AI is completely unsafe.
mm,
Um, if you actually read Anthropic's privacy terms or
mm,
OpenAI's privacy terms, you can see there is a provision that can help you opt out of data training. So this compliance question is more nuanced than people think. So
mm,
avoiding AI entirely is not a safety strategy. It's just a falling behind. And that's one thing I have to tell those people, because
mm,
they didn't try it before.
mm,
So when you have the basic confidence about the security side, then I think the next step is to do something like to incorporate AI into your workflow. And the
mm,
starting point is something I call it orchestration layer. For
mhm,
example, in a law firm, you can set up your agent to help you to do all the client intake works. Just share the context between you and your clients to help you to filter the cases that you deem that is really valuable. And when you are in a legal department, you also need to build up the orchestration layer as a first step.
mm,
Why? Because only in this way you can connect the business side and the legal departments. So whenever the business team have some issues, they can discuss their questions with agents first. And if
Yeah.
that is a low risk task, agent can directly deliver the results. But if that is kind of middle, like the high risk task, then the agent can connect someone in the legal department and just move things forward. So I would say orchestration layer is really important in both law firms and in legal departments. And in my framework, you can see we can go through from the workflow and to the data and to the infra. So the orchestration layer is the prototype of the infra. So
Hmm.
all the data will kind of lie in your infra, lie in your orchestration layer, and gradually, many years maybe, and then you will have a very mature infra that's based on your orchestration layer. So that's my thinking about it.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, Helen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was wonderful speaking to you. I look forward to following the rest of your experiments and see how they go. I'll link to your LinkedIn and a lot of your writings for people to read up and connect with you. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoy it.
Thanks.